mean, there's a lot. I'd love to dive into all of it, but just for time.
Of course.
Talk about your faith story.
So my faith story is a good one. I grew up in a Catholic home.
Yeah.
My mom and dad, they knew that faith was important, 100%. Like when we were younger, we went to church on Sunday, Catholic church, and I always knew that faith was an important component of my life. But as I started getting older, I started realizing that as a Catholic, I didn't really have a relationship with Jesus Christ. Right. I didn't understand why I had to go to the priest to confess my sins. Yeah. I didn't understand why I had to say all these Virgin Marys all the time. And this is no knock on anybody. This is just my own personal journey. Yeah. So I'm not knocking anybody for their belief system whatsoever. This is my personal journey. And I remember when I went to college in Las Vegas, of all places, Sin City, like of all places.
That's where you want to send your 18-year-old.
Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, and as much as I love UNLV, and I'm I love UNLV. Oh man, if my kids said they wanted to go to UNLV, I'd be so torn because I'm like, man, I love that school, but I know what it comes with. But I'm in Vegas. I'm in Vegas. And when I'm going to school, I mean, I'm partying, I'm up all the time, and my son is over here like, dang, Dad, I didn't realize you was partying. But I'm, going to school, and I remember there was like this void in my life, and I didn't know what the void was. Yeah. I knew it was something spiritual, but I didn't know what it was. So Randall Cunningham, I'm not sure if you remember Randall Cunningham, the old quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles and the Minnesota Vikings. Randall Cunningham is an alumni for UNLV, and so he comes out to practice every now and then just to check us out. So I got a small relationship with him at the time, and he ends up saying, hey, you want to come to church on Sunday?
No kidding.
So I was like, all right, cool, I'll come to church. And I was like, no problem. So I didn't realize that he was a pastor of the church out there. So I go to his church, Remnant Ministries, in Las Vegas. Okay. I go to his church, Remnant Ministries. So I loved it. And it helped that, after church, they sold chicken and waffles in the foyer. and those chicken and waffles were bomb, like the best chicken and waffles I ever had. So I kept coming back. So one day I wake up, I'm asleep. And I went out the night before. So I'm out the night before. Randall calls me. He's like, hey, what you up to, buddy? I was like, oh, nothing. Just waking up, He was like, hey, you want to get baptized today? I was like, wasn't planning on it. But he was like, man, come get baptized. So this was in 2007. Wow. April 2007. So I go down, they do the baptisms at his house. And I remember going down and coming up out of that water. I was like, man, like I just got the chills. Like I could really feel the Holy Spirit just come upon my life. And from that day forward, I really set out to live a life for Christ. Now, I will say I did backslide. But you'd be
lying if you said otherwise.
I'd be lying if I wasn't. But I knew what I was supposed to be doing. And it was when I graduated from college and me and my wife were dating, her and I had broken up for like 3 or 4 months because it just wasn't working. But in that time, that's where I rededicated my life to serving God. This was probably like 5 or 6 years after that. Yeah. And I really said, Lord, I want to just devote my everything to serving you. I want to live for you. And my wife, in her time, she was raised in a Christian home and she was walking away from the Lord. And the Lord was working on her at that same time too. So she rededicated her life. We rekindled and we got back together. But I just realized, I said, man, God is he is why I live. Everything I do, I want to glorify him. Yeah. And then what's very interesting about Randall real quick is like the same jacuzzi that I was baptized in was the same jacuzzi that his 2-year-old son drowned in. Mm. And this was a couple years after. And I'll never forget that a week after his 2-year-old drowned in that jacuzzi, he gets up there and gives a sermon about, how his son Christian was in paradise. And to see a man come back from something so tragic like that, I knew man, there is nothing but God. Like God has to exist. This is real. Yeah. And since then, I have had so many vivid moments where I've encountered God and I knew God was over my life. Yeah. When it was getting into law enforcement, the moment I pulled into the Chino Police Department parking lot, I had this feeling come over me like, this is where you belong. Yeah. When I was in my career, there were certain moments, pivotal moments that God had his hand over my life, even so much so. And I don't know if you've watched the whole live that I did yesterday, but recently when I talked about the story of Gideon, and I'll share that. You mind if I share the story? Please. Like 4 weeks ago, I just woke up with this sense of anxiety over my chest. Like, man, you're getting ready to run for the biggest office next to President of the United States. Yep. And wondering if this is what God wants me to do. And so I'm like, I kept saying, like, God, tell me if this is what you want me to do, tell me. If not, like, close the door. So I woke up this morning and God just said, hey, I want you to go study about Gideon. So I've read about Gideon before, but I never really studied about Gideon. And so when I study about Gideon, I see that God gives him a plan. God tells Gideon, I want you to go take these towns back, and I want you to create an army. And Gideon is like unsure of himself. So Gideon asks God for a clear sign. And the first sign Gideon gets, it's unmistakable. Like, he gives an offering, and it's fire consumes it, but it doesn't burn. So Gideon gets a clear as day sign from God. This is what I want you to do. But Gideon, being fully human, still says, hey, God, can you give me another sign? So Gideon says, hey, look, I might get this out of order, but just bear with me. But Gideon says, all right, I'm going to put this fleece outside. And if the fleece when I wake up tomorrow, if the fleece is not covered in dew, but there's dew all around it, then I'll know. So sure enough, Gideon wakes up the next morning. He goes outside. The fleece is not covered with dew, but there's dew all around it. So Gideon is like, all right, cool, like, great. So then Gideon, still being fully human, does what all humans do. God, can you give me another sign? So he says, this time, when I wake up tomorrow morning, if there's dew on the fleece and there's no dew on the ground, then I'll know. Sure enough, Gideon goes to bed. He wakes up, dew on the fleece, nothing around it. So Gideon's like, all right, great, I got it. So then fast forward, Gideon gets all these signs. God still knew Gideon's heart, and he still knew that he was wavering a little bit. So God says, hey, Gideon, I want you to go down to the camp, and I'm going to do something for you. So Gideon goes down to the camp with his partner, and he overhears the soldiers of the camp that are getting ready to invade, like, man, I had this dream last night, and we're going to basically get taken over, and it's not going to be pretty. Yep. So Gideon comes back to the camp, and Gideon's like, man, like, they already afraid of us. Like, we're good. Like, now he's feeling confident. Yeah. So I walked away from that with this revelation that you have not because you ask not. It's okay to ask me for a sign that this is what you're supposed to do. So I wrote down in my journal, I said, God, give me a sign. Tell me this is what you want me to do. Tell me this is where you want me to go. Well, the next day I go speak at a school, and I'm speaking and I'm doing my thing. I get off the stage as one kid comes up to me, and he's like, hey man, Ryan, thank you so much for coming. You really spoke to my heart. You really opened my mind to so much. And I was like, oh man, no problem. I said, if you don't mind me asking, man, what's your name? He's like, oh man, I'm Gideon. I said, no way. Yeah. My eyes lit up. He was like, yeah, I know my name is biblical. I said, bro, I'm not tripping because your name is biblical. I'm tripping because you're an answered sign from God. You're an answered sign from God. And I walked away from that just thinking, like, number one is I've never met a Gideon in my life.
Never met one.
I've never met a Gideon. So it was unmistakable. Right. But two, I was just like, man, like, God, like, you even have your hand in this. Yeah. I don't know what tomorrow looks like. I literally don't. I don't know what next year looks like. Yeah. But my goal is just being obedient in every step I take for God, and that he gets all the glory in whatever I do.
Yeah, and that's the Christian life, right? We get so wrapped up in what we define as success or how we measure success and all these things. Success is pursuing God. Mm-hmm. That's success. And you've been successful if you've done that. And what I like about your story, so we start with, Breaking Barriers United. This is what you're trying to do. It really is, if I can put it in these terms, a ministry of reconciliation. It's bringing two sides to a common understanding of truth. Yes. Right? Well, you couple that with your faith story, and when we look at, to me, Christianity is a ministry of reconciliation. It's reconciling the broken and the lost to a holy God. I mean, that's what Christ came to do. It was reconciling to God. And that should be the outflow of the Christian life. And you've been walking that. And so to then say, all right, the next step is for me to work in this area of reconciling, breaking down walls between these two sides on a larger scale, it's really not different than your Christian life, the work that you've been doing. It's just a continuation of the same thing. And what people, I think, misunderstand about that sometimes, and correct me on any of this, but I think what people sometimes think that means is, well, you're saying that nothing's really important. We all just need to get along. That's not reconciliation. No. Reconciliation is saying, hey, we both have things to learn. There is truth. Mm-hmm. We need to put aside whatever is keeping us from getting to that truth. Correct. But sometimes you need a voice or voices that will come together and say, look, this is the truth. How do we get each of you to the place where you can agree on that? You make so many good points with that statement. And when I have those kind of discussions, I just had one with
a family member actually recently who's on the opposite side of where I'm at. And I said, look, you know, because they live a lifestyle that I don't necessarily agree with. And I said, for me, I get my truth from the Bible. That's what's true for me.
Right.
And just because you don't agree doesn't necessarily mean that we can have conflicting relationship with each other. Right. And I said, you have to understand something. I'm not perfect. I'm not on a pedestal. As a matter of fact, I fail daily. Yeah. I think it was the great Billy Graham that said, I sinned on my way over here when I saw the man asking for food and I drove right by him. Yeah. Like we all sin. Yeah. Sin is in the eyes of God, not one sin is greater than the other. Where we have to get to is we have to get to a place where we can learn to agree to disagree. And I recognize that everybody is not going to think how I think. Right. Everybody's not going to come to the same place. But it doesn't mean that we can't coexist with one another. And so when I talk about politics and when I talk about getting into this world, how do we bring these two worlds together and learn to agree to disagree? Yeah. And I learned this is probably in my marriage, one of the most valuable lessons I've learned through my marriage. When I got married, I realized that we are not going to agree on everything. Right. Well, I went to a marriage class early on when we was a premarital class. And one of the things that's always stood out to me, it's so funny. He says, when a woman says that she has nothing to wear, it means something completely different than when a man says, I have nothing to wear. When a woman says she has nothing to wear, it means she has nothing new to wear. When a man says he has nothing to wear, it means he has nothing clean to wear. Right, right. Both are very, very true statements, but different. Sure. So why I say that is because I've had to learn that we have to compromise, we have to agree to disagree, but you can do it without having to compromise who you are, right? Without having to bend the need to compromise what God has called you to be and who He's created you to be. I wrote a book called Happy Eyes, and it's all premised on becoming all things to all people without compromising who you are. Yeah. And it's centered around truth. And I think if truth is the barometer of where we need to go, then we can all eventually get there sometimes. Yeah. But everybody has a different journey, and I'm not going to judge people. Right. I could judge the sin, but I'm not going to judge the person. I need to love the person. I need to be empathetic to the person. I need to be respectful to the person, but not necessarily have to agree with the sin that for me comes from the Bible.